Welcome to Your Career Podcast with Jane Jackson, where I help mid-career professionals overcome self-doubt and gain career clarity and the confidence to create the life and career they desire. Book a Zoom chat with me at janejacksoncoach.com. I'd love to meet you and discover what's happening in your career.
Too many women rely on the fact that their partner has paid into a pension, only to discover they hadn't. So people get divorced. The rise in amicable divorces in the UK means that without getting legal advice from a solicitor, women aren't getting a share of their husband's pension. And that pension has usually been built because the woman has stayed home with the children. They've sacrificed her career for his career. He's built his pension up. She hasn't built hers. They get divorced. And because of amicable divorces, she doesn't seek a share of his pension, which she's entitled to. And another thing for me, another reason, even if you stay married and your husband's built a big pension up, I personally want financial independence. There is a risk whereby you're having to ask for money for things. And I don't want to spend like the latter half of my life asking for money or making apologies for how I spend my money.
The idea of a Talented Ladies Club was born when freelance copywriter Hannah Martin realized that so many of her friends were struggling to resume their careers after having children. Now, these women were successful, talented, ambitious women who should have had no problem earning good money in jobs they loved, if only the world understood the value of mothers. So Hannah reasoned that if she knew so many talented but frustrated women in her own social circle, there must be thousands, if not millions, of women feeling the same all over the world. And at that time, there were no inspiring and empowering online content courses talking to them. So Hannah decided to create her own. She enlisted the help of her good friend, designer and illustrator Carrie Fisher, and together the two of them brought Talented Ladies Club to life in 2013. Hannah and Carrie wanted to create an inspiring resource that would show women that becoming a mother was not the end of their career, and it was actually the start of an exciting new adventure. I'm delighted to welcome Hannah Martin back to Your Career Podcast for the third time, and let's welcome Hannah to the show. And so here is the lovely Hannah Martin. Nice to see you yet again, Hannah.
You too, Jane.
We first met round about 2014 via Twitter, and then I interviewed you on my podcast in 2015, and then about 6-7 years later, I interviewed you again, and now another 6-7 years later, we've got to stop meeting like this, Hannah. It's like the 7-year itch. Got to talk to Hannah Martin again and find out what's going on.
It's been too long.
Yeah, that's right. And also, we kind of reconnected again after a while because I noticed that you have launched a new business, a new arm of your business, and it's so relevant for so many women right now that I thought it's really important. It's a good time to have you back on. But let's just very quickly do a recap, because I was wandering around in Bondi Beach, at Bondi Beach one year, back in round about 2014, and I posted a photo or I said something about how beautiful the beach is and the weather, and then you responded and we ended up having this conversation, getting to know each other, and your business has been fascinating because back in 2013, transitioning from an amazing copywriting career where you worked at Ogilvy One in London and in Hong Kong, you set up your own business running Talented Ladies Club.
So that was inspired by, I had my daughter in 2009 and I'd always worked in London. I was a single mum to a son before that, had to continue my career. So I'd always worked through motherhood. And then when I had my daughter, I started working at home. And I thought I've got to meet local women because I was always just sleeping in my hometown and working in London. And I was quite surprised to meet so many women who had amazing careers, but they hadn't been able to successfully continue them after becoming a mother. And I felt this was just such a waste to society, but also a waste to these women. And there was nothing at the time that, it seems incredible now because there is so much, but there was nothing that talked to mothers that were ambitious, and gave them permission to be ambitious and gave them advice and encouraged them. And so, although I had no experience of creating a website or community or anything, and didn't even know what I was doing really, I just set Talent Ladies Club up because I just felt that someone should be out there talking about this. So that's why I set up Talent Ladies Club. It was, specifically talking to that kind of group of women, and wanting to give them support and encouragement.
And the thing is that when you do take time off to have your baby and you have your maternity leave, and there's always this mummy guilt and angst that so many people feel, isn't there? Like, oh, I really want to get back to work, but then I want to be a good mother as well. And then will I be taken as seriously when I go back to work? And, in your experience with all the women that you've worked for and with, when they do return to work, what's the general feeling?
I think the guilt that you talk about is a very common feeling, and there is that kind of thing of being like pulled two ways. Your work is your identity, especially if you have a career you love. It's a really big part of who you are and what makes you happy and what fulfills you and how you see yourself. But then you also have got this child, and you want to be their mother, and you want to raise them, and you want to be a good mother for whatever the perception of a good mother is for yourself. But also you miss that child. That's really strong bond. And physically going into an office, I remember I would just like take my child's clothes and like smell them in the office and think, when I go back to work with my son. It is really, really tough to do that. And I think today there's a much more understanding, firstly, of the value of that cohort of women that become mothers, and the loss to businesses if they don't come back, but also the needs of a mum to balance that. And I think it's much more possible today to still have a career of some degree that gives you what you need, and to be a mum. When I had my son, it was literally work or stay at home. That there was nothing in between that. There was no choice, and that was really tough. But I think today that there is much more choice, because I think it is difficult, and I think it is still really important. So being like, my son is now 23, so I'm kind of looking at it from the other end of this now, and the women like me who either had to or wanted to continue working, that managed to continue their careers in some way, I think have fared better than the ones who gave up their career to stay home and raise their children. Because the friends that I've got have really struggled to come back into the workplace with a long career break later.
Yeah. And also, when you mentioned that, it makes me think, obviously you hope that marriages, last for, a lifetime. And the thing is the reality is that sometimes they don't. And having gone through a divorce myself as well, the time out of the workforce, that affects your superannuation, your savings, your earning capacity.
Oh,
when you want to re-enter the workforce, you think, oh, I need to earn more money, but then I'm not able to because I've had this hiatus while I was being a good mum. And there are all of these thoughts that go through your head that make it very, very challenging. And then, if your savings have suffered as a result of, relationship issues or whatever, it sort of piles one problem on top of another and causes quite an anxious situation, doesn't it? I'm thinking about, like, when we first met, my children were so much younger, and now obviously they've grown, and your son, who was very young then, and is now in his early 20s. My children, who are in their teens and early 20s, well, one's just turned 40. How did that happen? But then now both of them have got one or two children, and I can see how the juggle of being a mother, being a career woman, wanting to be able to do it all, it really is a struggle, because you feel torn in both ways, and it's that fine balance, isn't it? And so that must have been what drove you to start Talented Ladies Club.
It is, and I think just I want to just come back to just briefly. the financing, why it is really important that I think it's very difficult for women if they have given up work and their relationship doesn't work, because I have a lot of friends who have got divorced in the years since, and they can't get mortgages because they've been out of the workplace. So there are always add-on things as well. And I think, and also the lack of confidence that women have when they're out of the workplace for a long time, really, they don't see themselves as the workplace has moved on, and we know now with AI, it's moved on hugely. And if you were last in the office 10 years ago, there's a lot that you feel that you've missed. And you and I know that those skills are there, and actually you've added many soft skills to that. But that's really hard. But going back to what you just said about that struggle, and I think the biggest thing that I learned, and actually I was very good at this myself. I don't know whether that's because of my upbringing and how my parents were, but it's letting go of perfectionism. Being a good enough mum and being a good enough employee, and understanding where your kind of bars are. So I want, there are things that I really want to achieve. These are standards that I have that are really important here, and I will adhere to them. And there are other areas I can let things go, because I think if you hold yourself to this value that I must be the perfect mum, whatever kind of that is for you, and then I must be the perfect employee, and I must succeed at my job, and I must be the perfect wife or partner, I think you're setting yourself up to fail, and you're setting yourself up for a lot of misery, because you're not, we're human beings and we're going to drop balls occasionally. So I think being kind to yourself and accepting that all you can do is your best, and that has to be enough. I think, as you say, in looking back on all those years and all the women I've spoken to, the ones that have navigated it more successfully are the ones that have been able to let things go.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something. It's quite funny. When my daughters were very young, we had baby play groups, and the baby play groups, they got very competitive because they'd be held at each person's house each time. Every week we'd meet at someone else's house, and someone one week made the most amazing cakes from scratch. And then, of course, when it was my turn, had to make something amazing from scratch. But the baby was crying, and I'm not that good a cook. And I got myself so stressed out because I wanted to be the perfect mum and be, Betty Homemaker. And I'm not. And after that disastrous baby play group, when really my cakes were no good whatsoever, Marks and Spencer's were great. So I gave myself permission. I don't need to bake if I'm not good at it, Jane. It's fine. But you're absolutely right. Little things like that, they can all add up as well, because it makes you think about your self-worth. And they can be as small as, do I do it from scratch, or do I buy something? But also, it's how good am I as a mother, as a wife, as an employee, as so many things. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we?
Yes, we do. And we don't need to put that amount of pressure on ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And what's so good is when you started Talented Ladies Club, you provided so many articles and support courses and things that would help people to navigate those challenges and make people realize that it's actually okay not to be perfect as well. And basically, we're all just doing the best we can at this phase in our lives. Yeah, yeah. And so you've navigated it really well now, and we've both got grown-up children. And now we've got grandchildren as well. You just wait, Hannah, it'll be your turn
I don't want them
yet. Well, I thought even when I was perfectly old enough to have grandchildren, I said I'm too young to be a grandmother. But the minute the first grandchild came along,
as I remember you came, we met up because you came over, didn't you?
Yes.
When your grandson was born, it was in London.
Yeah. 2019. Yes, I made a trip down to Worthing, and I escaped before the baby was born. Well, the baby was two weeks late anyway. So my 3-week trip to the UK ended up being 5 weeks, and now he's 6.5 years old. So how wonderful is that? It's just amazing, such a joy. But that was a good trip. In fact, we recorded a conversation all about collaboration and maintaining authentic relationships. And I'll leave in the show notes the link to our video that recorded in Worthing, because it really is, it's a fun video that I'm sure that anyone who has a little bit of time would have 2 or 3 minutes just to watch what our conversation was. But now, Hannah, things have evolved. Talented Ladies Club grew and grew, and I know that your website has had like over 5 million viewers over time, and your business has also evolved. So, as a businesswoman, as a wife, as a mother, talk me through this transition period, and then I want to find out all about the new business as well.
Yeah, so as it says, I mean, when I started Talent Ladies Club in 2013, I had a 2-3-year-old and a oh God, he was 13, he actually was nearly 10. And so I had really young children, and I said there really wasn't much around for women at the time. And so I really loved creating this resource and learning. And it kind of a couple of years ago, I sort of realized that actually like my children weren't young anymore. And the women that I spent time with, my friends and my acquaintances, we were kind of out the other side of that. And also I felt that we're in a market now where there is a lot of, the workplace has changed, a lot more support for mums now in the workplace. There's a lot more resources online. And I sort of felt that actually like a lot of the work had been done. So Talent Club still keeps going, but I was also starting to kind of think of, or organically notice a new challenge. So some of my friends were turning 60, and I started working with a company in the UK called Pension Bee. As a female-owned company that is a pension platform, and I did some work for them. And the more I researched retirement and financial retirement, the more I realised that actually this same cohort of women that I was talking to in 2013, who were young mums, were now kind of looking down the barrel of retirement and not being prepared. Just as they weren't prepared for being mums, they're now in this sort of environment where they're not really prepared for financially for retirement. But more than that, I love these Blue Zones, and I've been following Dan Bretner from the Blue Zones for a number of years now. And as I get older, I mean, I've always enjoyed looking after my body and being healthy, but I'm very consciously now doing things that mean that I'm going to hopefully live a long time, but hopefully live well for a long time. And so I started to think kind of really holistically about retirement and what I wanted this next stage of my life to be like, how I was preparing for that, and then realising a bit like with TLC that there really wasn't an awful lot that talked to women in the way that I wanted to talk to women, because I mean, I'm 54, but I still feel like I'm 34, 24. And I don't, when I see, we have a company in the UK, I don't know if it's global, it's called Saga, and it's for people over 50. So once you turn 50, you start getting leaflets about Zimmer frames and cruises and everyone's grey haired and playing with grandkids. And I'm like, I don't relate to that, And I look at my parents who are in their 70s and 80s, and they have a better social life than me, and they're really active people. And so the version of retirement, or not even retirement, but older age that I had wasn't represented. So similarly to when I started TLC, I thought, well, if that's not out there, then I want to create something that is inspiring, that is educational, and that will help people from their mid-40s onwards help to plan for retirement, but in all ways, not just money.
Yeah, too often people think of retirement and planning for retirement as the financial thing, but there's the spiritual, there's the relationships, there's your physical and mental health as well. And certainly for me in my 60s now, mobility is so important, because if you're not able to get up off the ground without using your hands, if you can't balance and you're a bit off balance and you take a fall, I'm very aware of all of that. And you're absolutely right. You have to maintain mobility, your fitness, in addition to the financial side, and then of course the relationships, because women live a little bit older. In fact, just before our when we started this interview, I had a look at some of the Australian retirement statistics, and I'll be interested in how they compare with the ones in UK where you are, because in Australia, Australian women retire on average at 62.7 years old. Okay. And so 2.5 years earlier than men, yet face a significant gender superannuation gap because of the earning potential, because women have taken time off work and had to get back up to speed, and then they weren't contributing to their superannuation. And so women tend to have 1/3 less super than their male counterparts. It's interesting, isn't it? And then, so the low balances, about 42% of women in Australia retire with less than 100,000 Aussie dollars in their super accounts. You can't retire on that. That's not enough. And systemic causes is primarily driven by broken work patterns, time taken off for unpaid caring responsibilities. And that, I was thinking also that the responsibilities do fall on women a lot when they're parents are aging. We're kind of in a sandwich generation, aren't we? Where we've got young children, we've got aging parents, children need care, aging parents need care. We still need to work, we still need to earn money. You're being pulled in every direction. It's quite a stressful situation for so many people, and you don't actually realize it because, as your parents get older, of course you want them to live longer and healthily too, but then they also need you to be there, and you've got to be there for your children. And oh my goodness, how do we cope? How on earth do people cope? And then there is that historical gender pay gap as well. And in Australia, according to the latest Australian Bureau of Stats, it's 11.5% still now. So that's interesting. So in the UK, because I know you've been a very strong advocate for women over the years, and you lobby for women's equal pay. How are things in the UK?
It's funny because it's identical to that. So for example, for women in their early to mid 50s, have around £86,000 in a pension compared to 156,000 with men. So it's a very similar, very similar number. And you talked about the gender pay gap, and I wrote an article yesterday, actually, funnily enough, about why do women have less in their pension than men? And all the reasons you cite are exactly that. But also women tend to, and I researched an article a while ago about, so we know that women predominate in industries that are lower paid, like care and kind of shop work and things like that. And so we are disproportionately represented in lower paid jobs and underrepresented in higher paid jobs like finance and IT. But interestingly, there's been research done that when an industry starts to attract more women, so if an industry was maybe more male dominated and then it shifts, become more female dominated, the median wage drops. So even when we enter an industry en masse, then that industry becomes less valued. But yes, women aren't, and there are other reasons as well that women are far less likely than men to seek out financial advice. We tend to, and I don't know whether that's because historically, the husband went out and earned the money, the woman took care of the home. And so therefore, the finances were a man's remit. And whether there's still a hangover from that. The irony is that we know that when women do invest, for example, we generally outperform men in investments. We're better at picking investments than men, but we're more likely to put our money into cash savings rather than stocks and shares, which obviously don't on average increase as much. And there's also too many women rely on the fact that their partner has paid into a pension and also so you've got things like I've had friends who have believed their husbands were well-paying jobs, were paying into pensions, only to discover they hadn't. So, they didn't have a pension there. People get divorced. The rise in amicable divorces in the UK means that without getting legal advice from a solicitor, women aren't getting a share of their husband's pension. And that pension has usually been built because the woman has stayed home with the children. They've sacrificed her career for his career. He's built his pension up. She hasn't built hers. They get divorced. And because of amicable divorces, she doesn't seek a share of his pension, which she's entitled to. And another thing for me, another reason, even if you stay married and your husband's built a big pension up, I personally want financial independence. If I want to go out and buy 10 red dresses that all look exactly the same, I don't want my husband saying, why are you buying 10 red dresses? That's my money. But if you have a pension that your husband has built up, there is a risk whereby you're having to ask for money for things. And I don't want to spend like the latter half of my life asking for money or making apologies for how I spend my money. So I want financial freedom as well.
Yeah, because it's so disempowering, isn't it? When you have to ask for permission as a grown woman to do something or to pay for something or to be allocated an allowance, which I'm sure that Gen Z would be, absolutely horrified to hear because, it's a completely different mindset. But thinking about moving into retirement age, it is really the baby boomers and, the older Gen X who are getting into that phase now. And the way that we were brought up, there was a certain way of thinking that is very different from the younger ones. So hopefully, with the subsequent generations who are getting older, they have more financial power or financial understanding. And I really wish so much that when I was in secondary school, there had been more subjects on investment or more on economics that was personal, so that would actually affect our lives, because there was none of that, certainly when I was growing up.
It was all abstract, wasn't it? And I don't remember anyone ever teaching me about things like compound growth and we tend to think. I mean, I even did a few years ago that investing is complicated. You can't possibly begin to understand it, and the complexities of if you want to get into kind of which type of stock is right now is you can go down a rabbit hole and learn in great detail. But if you only need a basic grasp of how investment works to access it and to make money out of it, and there's always concerns about we hear about stock market dips. And we think, well, it's dangerous to invest in the stock market. But historically, there are always dips. And actually, dips are fine, because if you're still buying, you want there to be dips, because when you buy when it's low, you're getting more stocks. And actually, the stock market has outperformed other investments.
Up and up and up, always.
I think in the UK, things are, like we're saying, like the younger generations tend to be a bit more financially literate than we were. In the UK, they introduced something called auto-enrollment a few years ago, I think around 2016, which basically means that you don't have to opt into a pension, you have to opt out. So if you meet certain thresholds, if you earn £10,000 a year or more in paid employment, your employer must enrol you in a pension. They must contribute. So some of your salary is sacrificed. I think you contribute 4%, they contribute 3%, and the government contributes 1% in tax benefits. And you can opt out, but you have to physically opt out of it. And I think that is a really good step for young people. However, what it is also doing is it's people are sort of being a bit, it's making people a bit kind of blasé, and they kind of think, well, I've got pensions covered, and actually it's not going to be enough still. It's a good starting point, but people still need to take responsibility for their own retirement. And one of the things that I found quite shocking, and this is when I started actually really investing in my own pension, was when a friend happened to mention, when I was around her house one day, how much she needed in a retirement fund to live on. And I was horrified because it was several £100,000 less than I had in my pension at the time. And I thought, how do you even get to that? I'm happy to say I've passed that now, but that was because of the action I've taken since. But so I've since learned a lot more about, we have something called retirement living standards in the UK, where a body works out how much you need per year for a minimum, a moderate and a comfortable retirement, whether you're single or in a couple. And it's quite shocking when you look at how much money that is versus how much people have in pensions.
But that's a scary thing. Yeah, that's a scary thing, isn't it? It's like with the Australian statistics, because what women have on average is way less than what you need in order to be able to live a decent life, even with the age pension, because there's an age pension that kicks in at a certain level in Australia. And I mean, the fortunate thing is that with superannuation, employers have to pay. Well, it used to be a 10%. It's now gone up incrementally, which is good. So a decent amount gets put into a superannuation account that people can't access until they reach, a certain age, and that age changes, but it's in their 60s. But it's never enough. It's not enough unless you've really had very high earnings potential or practical earnings over the years in order to get that level high enough so that when you do retire, you think, oh, I feel comfortable because I don't need to rely on the age pension. But too many people still do. And if you only rely on the age pension, it's not going to give you a good standard of living. It's really eking out a living, which is awfully sad, isn't it? So
It is, and that's the rest of your life. It's not like you can get a better job in 5 years' time. If you've retired, that's it. What I will say is that, and I wish I'd known this earlier and acted on it, that if you don't have to invest huge amounts of money in a pension, if you start young enough, thanks to compound growth.
yes.
Even modest amounts that you put in that's extra to what the employer is putting in will massively change your financial fortunes when you're older. But even if you're in your 40s or 50s, one of the messages I really want to try and get across to people through my site is that, because I talk to a lot of people who either have very little or nothing, is that you can still do a lot, even if you're 55. And if you can put fairly modest amounts away. Yes, you're not going to be driving around in a Ferrari when you're 70, but you will have a pot of money to draw, and that could be a small holiday a year. That could be a meal out with friends once a month. That could just transform your life and pay for luxuries that perhaps you couldn't afford otherwise.
Yeah. And also you need to think about how much is enough, really, because as we do get older, our needs are less as well. You don't want to go shopping and buying the latest handbag each time. It is spending time with loved ones and enjoying yourself, just having a good time. And there are so many things that you can do that aren't going to cost a lot. You don't have to have huge overseas holidays. Just going somewhere, even locally, could be pleasurable if you're with the right people as well. So when it comes to your new business, which is fabulous, and it's called Rich Retiree. I like the name. Bit of alliteration, and it sounds aspirational and very good too. So tell me, how did Rich Retiree come about, and what does Rich Retiree offer women who may be concerned?
So it came about after working with Pension Bee and also kind of like looking at actually what challenges did I want in my life, and what was I doing and my friends doing to think ahead to retirement. And I, as I say, decided that there was nothing out there that really spoke to me, so I wanted to create something. And actually, the name was almost like a joke. I was trying to come up with a name for this new site, and there's 4 pillars of a good retirement. There's finance, wealth, community, and purpose. And when I talk about a rich retirement, I am actually not talking about money or just about money. I'm talking about an enriched, a genuinely rich life. But when I was trying to think of a name, and everything's been taken, as you can imagine, because I wanted a .com, and then I thought, one of the things that I have seen, and I don't know if you've seen as well, but has massively exploded in the last sort of 10 to 15 years is the sort of scammy business coaching world, and this kind of like, I will make you a millionaire, and I make 8 figures a day, and all of this kind of thing. And I also really wanted to move into a world where these people weren't there yet as well, where it seemed quite like the early innocent days of TLC. It was just this lovely world of like, people just trying to help people retire. And I couldn't think of a name. And then as a joke, I thought, oh, what would one of these kind of scammy coaches, they would be like, oh, rich retirement, rich retiree. And I thought, rich retiree. And then it was, the Rich Retiree was available as a .com, which none of the names I came up with. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought I like the alliteration, I like the simplicity of it. And I like the meaning, actually, like it wasn't just about money. So I started telling, like there's people that I work with, and they all hated the name to begin with. But instead of, because I do listen to people I work with, and if they genuinely hate an idea, their gut instinct is usually right, so I wouldn't pursue it. But I found myself defending this. And the more I defended the name, the more I liked it. And eventually it won them over. And I thought, you know what? It's memorable. Even if you have an issue reaction to it, you're going to remember the name. So that's how it came up as Rich Retiree. But it does actually mean it's not about making you rich in a financial sense. It's about making sure you have enough money for the lifestyle that you want to live on.
You know what it makes me think of is enrichment. It's really a rich life, isn't it?
Yes,
That's what, because money is important, but once you've got enough, then everything else is extra. But in order to truly be happy, what is it that makes us happy? It's the love, relationships, friendships, family, good health. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you have, if you haven't got your health and you're not mobile, you're not going to be happy anyway. And that's not a rich life either. So it's wonderful that you do this holistically, because Rich Retiree, now, talking to you, it really does mean having an enriched life so that you're happy.
Yes, absolutely. And you can't, it's hard to be happy if you're lonely. It's hard to be happy if you wake up and there's no purpose to your day. It's hard to be happy if you're in physical pain.
Yes.
And it's hard to be happy if you're having to choose between, do we eat tonight or do we put the heating on in the UK, which, some people need to do. So absolutely, it is about all of those things, but it's also about one of the things there's no cookie cut of retirement. Some people want to spend the winter months in the sun, and some people want to spend it with grandchildren, and some people want to eat out and go to the theatre, and then some people want to work on garden centres. Whatever retirement means to you, I want you to be able to be physically able to enjoy it, and to be financially able to enjoy it as well. And I think the roots of I think a lot of people kind of think like, I've got a working life ends, retirement starts, and they kind of enter this thing where they haven't thought about what they're going to do, and they haven't built a life for themselves. And I think for me, it's like a kind of an off and an on ramp. And I'm 54, but I'm already building the life that's going to see me into my retirement. I'm a school governor. I'm just actually starting training later this year to be a special police constable, which is a volunteer police officer role. And I'm trying to do things that fill my life out, so that maybe as I'm maybe going to work less as I get older, I've got a life that I can build up. That will mean that I'm not someone who can wake up every morning and then not do anything. I have to have purpose. I know I need to get out of bed with something to do. And so it's about identifying for each person, what makes you happy? What are the things of those 4 pillars? What do you need to retire? And making sure that you start building those before you get there.
Oh, absolutely right. And I can so see you as a police constable, Henna. You'd make a great police constable. But it's so true when you think about it. And this is something that I do in the mornings. I wake up and I get up. And I'm very mindful that I can get up on my own. I think that's so important. And then I tootle off to the kitchen, and I can make myself a cup of tea, and I can make my husband a cup of tea, and I can make the cup of tea. I don't need someone else to do it. And then I take my, vitamins and minerals, and I look out the window, and I can see out the window. These are all like little things that give me a mindset shift to be so grateful of the little things that we have that we take for granted every single day. And it's funny, and when I'm taking my vitamins, I'm taking these vitamins because I deserve it. I'm worth it. And it just makes me feel so happy that I'm independent and I can actually do it. And I think everyone who's getting just, that little bit older and thinking about retirement as well, it's important to be aware of those little things that, when you wake up, you are waking up. And what are you waking up to? That's the most important thing. And you're learning something new, you're educating yourself, you're getting up to speed with, different ways of doing things and new opportunities. I mean, it's fantastic. So how does Rich Retiree work? It's an online portal, and what does it provide?
So I've gone back to actually what I did when I started Talent Ladies Club. When I did TLC, I didn't have a business plan. I just started creating content. And as I created that content, I mean, I already had a level of knowledge and awareness, but that grew. And the site grew organically, and it was authentic and had genuine purpose. And so I've done the same with Retiree. I am I will be creating a course. So I want to ultimately create a program that helps women to audit all those kind of 4 areas and audit their life and audit themselves and work out what do they need for each of those 4 areas and start putting things in place. So that is what I'm ultimately going to be doing. But in the meantime, I'm just enjoying creating content again. You know, like it's you know, learning about stuff, you know, finding out for myself what is available out there and building what I hope is a genuinely useful platform, so that I want to build this resource that people can come to it and learn about money and learn about financial planning and learn about, you know, how much you need in a pension, or learn about how to pick a pension fund, or learn about what kind of sports are going to help them, or how they make friends in their 50s if they're lonely, and all of these things, and how to live for longer, and what are the habits that they need to get rid of and what the habits they need to adopt, so that they learn things and it becomes a resource that people can share and people can kind of enjoy. So that's it. So basically at the moment, I just want to build something that's really useful for people, that they can get value from it, whilst growing my knowledge, so I can ultimately build a brilliant course that will help people to actually plan the retirement that they want in a realistic way.
Yeah, it's such an important resource and source that you're actually creating for people, because we're an aging population. We're living longer and longer. You know, medical advances are helping us overcome so many medical challenges that before would probably take our lives much earlier. And so we're living that much longer. We need to know what to do with ourselves as we get older and how to take care of ourselves so that we can live our best life rather than just getting older and fading into obscurity. Because, you know, what a lot of women I've spoken to who are getting that little bit older and getting into their 60s or 70s is that they feel invisible and unheard. And if you build a community of people who are, you know, just really growing more mature together, let's say that, gaining maturity together, and we understand each other, then that really is a community of support that's so very, very important. Because I've noticed that a lot of old people, as they get, when not old people, but people as they get older, they tend to withdraw because they can't do the things that they used to be able to do, but they forget that they can do all this other stuff if only they were aware of it as well.
Yeah, and I think it depends. Hopefully I want to create a vision for people that challenges what retirement is. I'm lucky, I think, because, you know, I have great role models. Like my grandmother only died this year. She was 100. You know, she lived independently to her 90s. But she was a long distance lorry driver. She divorced twice. She ran her own business. She was a tough woman. She, you know, she was sheep dipping in her 70s. You know, she was really tough.
Wonderful.
And my parents, my mum is in her late 70s. She went backpacked around Malaysia and Indonesia with me last year. We're going to China next year. My parents are really active in the local community. My dad's in his 80s. He's still he goes and fixes things in the church when it goes wrong. You know, they go traveling still, and they've got loads of friends. And so I feel fortunate in that I have role models. So my idea of old age is I'm just me, but I'm getting older. I'm not going to do less stuff, and I'm not going to expect to do less stuff. But I know that that's not everyone's example. So one of the things I really want to do is to help people not view retirement as a shutting down or the end of something, and that maybe there are some of the things that you used to do that physically aren't available to you, but there's lots more that still is, as you mentioned. And so give people hopefully a more positive and excited idea of what their old age might be like.
It's very exciting, isn't it? Because it's really the world of possibilities now for retirees. It's not, you finish working and that's the end. It's you finish working, but this is the beginning of the next phase. And so it's like a second act in a way. And the second act is always exciting.
But it is, but also, you've got, I mean, I've got more experience as I've got older. I've got more confidence as I've got older, and I want to carry that on. I've more confidence to stand up for things I believe in, not less. So I feel like, as an older people, and I think there's a brilliant book called Breaking the Age Code, written by one of the world's top gerontologists, and it's fascinating. It talks about actually our impression of old age is the biggest driver in how physically healthy we are when we get older. If we think of old people as feeble, then we are more likely to die younger, we're more likely to have poor hearing, all of those things. But if our impression is that old people are vital and important, we will have longer and healthier old ages. But one of the things she talks about in there is the idea that, older people should be admired for their wisdom and life experience. They should be, we should be asking them their opinion on things because they've got so much more lived experience than us. And the culture in America particularly is very youth focused. So it tends to sort of picture old people as a dribbly people who are walking bent over and, haven't got anything valid to offer. When actually these people in Asia are revered and treated as wise older people that you go to for advice. So, I prefer that version of being old, where the lived experience I have gives me more confidence and more vitality and hopefully to play a positive role in society to balance out the wonderful energy and bravery and confidence that the youth has. Because I think all of these things are important for the world, but it needs to be balanced by lived experience in the older. And so hopefully, I will play a part in changing people's perception of what old age actually is.
Yeah. Something it makes me think about, I'm half Chinese, half English. And so that Chinese culture comes through. And you're absolutely right. The old grandma, grandpa, abba, popo, apo, all of them, they're so well revered and respected because of their age, because of their experience. And the families are very much involved in the upbringing of the younger ones who come along as well. And they're part of the teaching and the caring. And that it benefits all the generations because the middle generation gets the help that they may need. The older generations feel still needed. The younger ones learn from their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents because they're still involved with each other. And it's such a beautiful way to be. I think in today's society, because people tend to travel so much and they move away and they live overseas or they live in a different city, they don't get to see their close family as often as they would have back in the days when people didn't travel so much. And I think we've missed that connection, don't you think? The connection is gone. And so hopefully through your teachings of Rich Retiree, people would start to hopefully reach out a bit more to the older generations within their family who are still with us and include them more as well. That would be a wonderful positive benefit to it, wouldn't it?
There's Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. I don't know if you've read that, but there's a chapter in there that talks about a community in America, and they were Italian immigrants, and they moved to a town in America, and I think it was up a mountain. But anyway, they moved to this town, and this town had exceptional longevity. They had very low incidences of cancer and heart disease, and they outlived other communities. And scientists would study this community to try and work out why. They thought maybe they had maybe the rainwater on the mountain, the mountain stream water was better. It wasn't. Maybe they had better jobs, they couldn't find diet, lifestyle, environment. Nothing gave any clue as to why they were living longer until their society started to change, and the younger people. So what they were doing is they were living in multi-generational families, and when people got home from work at night, they were manual labourers. They had quite tough jobs. So they'd come home and they would go and sit in like the kind of town that they replicated, like almost an Italian village, and they would sit in a town square and they would all have dinner in this town square, and then they would go back to the multi-generational homes. And then when young people started to move out and live other places or want to live on their own without grandpa and grandma living with them, their age and their health went back to national level. So they had the same instances of cancer and heart disease. And basically, I mean, I'm cutting a very long story short, but what they concluded was that it was their lifestyle that had almost protected them from these things and had made them healthier, because they had all of those things you're talking about, wonderful, all these generations intertwined, and they had that community of eating together, talking about problems and sharing them. So I think that's why community is so important. And even if you don't have a grandmother alive or parents living near you, you can build community around you with the people that you know and still enjoy that wonderful thing where you've got people from different generations and different life experiences, and you're entwined in lives. And we know things like volunteering and caring for others also helps longevity. So I think it's how you build a community, whether it's a family community or whether you create one. But the important thing is being part of a community.
Yeah, that sense of belonging. And I think these days, especially because, there's so much work from home and online this and online that community bond where you actually meet face to face and have time together where it's not rushed, that is missing. And I think what happens when you don't have that community is that we lose the stories that people can tell. And I think that, especially, I mean, I love telling my grandsons stories of, what it was like when Pawpaw was younger and we did this and we did that. And I don't know if they're that interested, but hopefully something will stick in their minds that this is the way it was. And what was really interesting? During COVID, my daughter, because we couldn't see each other physically, and even if they were just down the road, I wasn't allowed to see them. We started having these Zoom conversations, and my daughters said, "Mummy, can we please start Chinese school?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do you want with Chinese school?" They said, "We want to know more about our heritage. And so can you tell us, every week or twice a week, let's meet and you tell us stories about when you were growing up, when Uncle Tommy was growing up, my brother, what was it like for Pawpaw, my mum and my dad, and can we hear all the stories?" And that's what we started doing. And it was so lovely because they were so interested to find out about their heritage as well. So I think when we actually take time to allow the community spirit to grow and talk to each other and tell those stories, we learn so much from each other. And I hope that over time, especially with what you're doing as well and building a strong sense of community, whether you're within the same family or different families or wherever, if you can share those stories, we can all learn from each other as well.
And I think Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, but then it's not just mentally you feel stronger and you're inspired to look after yourself more so that physically you can be stronger, and then you can live longer so that you can enjoy what you're enjoying longer as well. And
definitely,
Hannah?
And I think another thing about that, and I think your community is like, when you're on your own, your problems are huge because it's you thinking about your problems, and you're the most important person to yourself. And a really important part of being a part of a community is that you're part of something bigger than you. So your daughters are so they're connecting to their Chinese heritage, and suddenly it's not just them; they're part of a bigger, something that's bigger than them, and that is really, really important for our mental health, where we belong to something, but that something is bigger than just us. And I think, so much of our life today is very self-centered and centered on ourselves. And, we all go around carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, and no one understands our problems because we are utterly unique. And actually, none of us really are that unique, but we're all part of different communities. So, for your daughters being part of your family, but also being part of the global Chinese community, being part of a work community, even, I play pickleball on a Tuesday night, and that's a really lovely community. And you feel like you belong to something, and it's not just you. And I think that's a really important part of community as well.
That must be a very, very strong part of your Rich Retiree program. And so, Hannah, I'm sure everyone will be very interested to find out where they can find it. Is it richretiree.com? Let me see.
It is, yeah.
We go through talentedladiesclub.com first.
No, you can just go straight to richretiree.com. Yes, because of course, as we know, I managed to get the .com.
Lucky you. That was a coup, wasn't it? You must have done a happy dance when you got that Rich Retiree. Yes, I've got it. Well, I think it sounds so good, and I think it's really timely as well, because with the aging population, there are so many women who are concerned. How am I going to do this financially? What about my relationships? What about my health? What about my community? And it's all, spirituality also comes into it as well. And it's that belief that we belong to something that's more than just ourselves, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And how lucky was I that I tweeted about Bondi all those years ago, and you hopped on and started giving me your 2 cents worth about what you thought about Sydney beaches. And then it's funny, isn't it? I don't even know how the conversation kept going, but we were tweeting each other back and forth for a long time. It's like, oh yes, we better connect on LinkedIn.
But that was back when Twitter was actually quite social and in the much earlier days.
Yes, I know. I think things have changed a lot now, but it's been such a delight talking to you, Hannah. And I think we can carry on this conversation for another 2 hours, but I think for now this is part 1 of actually part 3. Part 3.1 and it's not going to be another 7 years before I interview you. Okay, I think another few months and then find out how Rich Retiree is going would be a very good idea. Yes, will you come on again?
I love talking to you, Jane.
Well, I think it's lovely, and definitely it's not going to be 7 years before we reconnect yet again. But thank you so much for today. All of the links to find Hannah and connect with her on LinkedIn as well, you'll find in my show notes on Your Career Podcast. And thanks for listening, everybody, and I will see you next time. Do you want to leave us with some parting words, Hannah?
No, just to say thank you so much, Jane, for inviting me on. I've had a lovely time, as always. But just to everyone else, just plan your retirement, but don't just plan money. Plan what you want to do. The world is your oyster.
Oh, it is. And as long as you take action, it can happen. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time. Want more career inspiration? Go to janejacksoncoach.com and take my free career quiz to find out how to gain career clarity and the confidence to go for that job you'll love. Or book a complimentary Zoom chat with me, janejacksoncoach.com. I'll see you soon.